Hello, everybody. Moses Frost here, and I'm coming to you from South Florida. Today's topic is going to be one from my backlog, and I'm going to discuss a very interesting case of a citizen journalist who had their phone hacked while in Serbia. So the gentleman lives in Serbia. His name is Slavisav. I'm going to butcher the last name, so I'm not even going to try it. I'm sorry if I got that wrong. But there will be a link to this in my social medias as to what occurred. The big thing here is that they used a chain of exploits from Celebrite to not just unlock an Android device. So that's what Celebrate would typically be used for, jailbreaking a device either through exploits, like was the case here, or through known channels, known medium. And so this was interesting because they also decided to install a brand new piece of spyware on the device called NovaSpy. Now, the part that's interesting here, well, there's several things interesting here. Number one, for those of you that don't know the geopolitics of Serbia, and if you're in the United States or Canada or many of the world, you might not be tracking it. Okay, so Serbia, from my understanding, they are a democratic system. However, for the last 10 years, they've been ruled by a party called the Serbia Progressive System, I believe, or SNS. And they have, in the last 5 years, according to many sources, been backsliding into more of an authoritarian lead versus a more democratic one. And so it is not surprising, once you understand what's been going on in Serbia, to see them attempting to spy on their own journalists. Now, whether that will change or not will be, and it depends. What kind of makes it interesting is that Serbia actually applied for EU membership in 2009. So technically, they've been trying to become part of the EU for over 10 years, or actually almost 15 years at this point. They were also, if you recall, there's been issues with Kosovo, where Kosovo wanted independence, and this was during the Soviet Union time or the USSR days. This was known as or just about after it was known as Yugoslavia. It was part of the Soviet Union back in the day, and so if you are a Gen Xer or millennial, you remember the Yugoslavian Civil War and Bosnia, Herzegovina, and things like that. This is that territory. Anyway, this piece of spyware, the other part that made it interesting is that Celebrate was selling to them. Now, what does this ultimately mean, right? Well, Celebrate is a Western country that they're out of Israel. They're going to want to sell their goods to valid, good governments, right? We don't want to sell it to authoritarian regimes, I would imagine. But what's really interesting is that Serbia, as they've been backsliding, may have had their Celebrate licenses pulled based on this one event. It's a very delicate balancing act once you are a company like Celebrate that's trying to do good, lawful good in the world, and having to deal with governments that may or may not be harming their citizens with what you're using. This is not something that, as a technologist, you might have thought about. If you were on the red team, or if you're a security person generically, not doing forensics and incident response, cell phones typically do not become part of your work stream. Even though they are a device where your data lives, we're typically not looking at cell phone data and making it, unless you own the company owns the asset, making it a huge part of the work stream. But in other countries, and especially in countries where they're very authoritarian, there's been talks about countries in the Middle East, and when you're dealing with people in actual law enforcement, mobile phones become a very, very big deal. And so you get to see these kind of exploits and these kind of things run around. Anyway, it's fascinating in that it's something that we have to track and we're going to have to deal with. The question is, from an enterprise standpoint, is do we extend our security protections and our perimeters to mobile devices? How do we do them effectively? In this case, it was an Android device that had the issue. If this was a Apple device, they're not going to let your grubby EDR hands on those hooks. So good luck on getting the Apple devices to give you the data that you need. Android devices, not so much. Anyway, that's all I got for today.